right, so I thought I would make an episode or two. I hadn't decided. I made a draft one that's 55 minutes. That was just me doing the draft at normal speed, kind of like a stream. I figured that would be too long, people to watch or you to watch or whatever. So I thought I would do a second episode that was just a summary of the draft picks, and then I could also go over the progressions. So I decided that one would probably be a lot better. I don't think people want to watch me just draft for an hour. So if you remember, I had the craziest draft of all time. I had the 4 second round picks and the 4 third round picks from a glut of trades the last 3 or 4 years. I completely revamped the system. I had collected a few. If you remember, I collected a couple extra second round picks from like 2 years ago, and I was originally going to do this big rebuild that year. But then the teams kept producing too well, and I didn't want to sell off on those specific years for different reasons. So I just pushed it back a year, and there was a couple years in a row I traded like a second from 2027 and just got like a second and a fifth from like 2029, and I made a few of those trades where I kind of accumulated picks in the future by giving up current ones. And then I made the big trades last year where I gave up my best 7 players, and for a couple the star center I got 2 seconds and a fourth, and then I got my overage defenseman, I got a third and a fourth, and then I got the second and a third from my like stud NHL winger that was like 6'5", a former first round pick of mine that was an NHL pick. I traded another NHL winger for I think a second and a fourth. He was a 19-year-old stud who was like fourth in the league in points last year, if you remember Zatkov. So anyways, that's how I got all these picks, and then just threw in a couple of fifths and sixths in there to get rid of some late round picks. I figured there's no chance for those like 12th to 15th rounders to make it, so I trade off every pick from the 10th to the 15th. I think I trade like 10, 11, 12, 13 for like a sixth, and then I just threw those 15ths in a few other trades, which is kind of a waste of a pick for me. Having all these guys, there's no way to roster the guys that were like the 20th pick for me. So anyways, as you can see, I just had a crazy amount of picks. I had 9 picks in the top 78 because I had the first round pick and then 4 and 4. And so even if you look back a few drafts, just to kind of show you, what happens is those second and fourth round picks end up like pretty solid. So if you look at a guy like Shepard's one of the best fourth round picks I've ever had. He turns out to be that good as an 18-year-old. And that's just a fourth rounder. Like, he was one of the better ones, but just to show you can really get some good talent in those late rounds. Like Ronald actually was a 6th rounder. Oh, he grew to 6'2". He was just a really good. He's only 17, turning on 18, so he's got 2 full years and an overage year left. And he was a guy I just traded a huge piece of that trade to get my stud rookie. I'll talk about in a bit. So like, he's a guy that's going to be like a all green in offense in a year or two, and going to be like 12 speed and like 10 on defense. So he's a really solid contributing. Like, yeah, I think he's their second line winger. So you get, and then I also use Senger actually in a big trade. He's really good off defenseman, so I trade him in another trade there, and just those guys are really valuable. So those are guys you can get in the 4th and 5th rounds, and Ronald's a 6th-rounder. And even in Ray actually was a 7th, and I legitimately jokingly drafted him. His name was Ray, but he was a good offensive defenseman. He was 5'10", and now he's 6'2", and he's got 17 puck handling. He's like actually good. He was so good, I actually had to trade an older defenseman that was a starter just because I wanted to make room for Ray because he was so good offensively. So anyways, that's the kind of like a crazy draft because I only had that amount of picks because I traded a bunch of them for the future picks. Trade like the 3rd and some other late round picks to the draft class I'm on now. So if you look at that, and then if you just to give you another kind of example of like some mid round picks, like a guy like Billy Daly was the draft before this one, and so he is actually a guy I purposely want to make these top 3, the 3 that will be overagers, the year that all of these guys are 19, or the kind of the championship type year. Some glitch there, showing 2027 twice and 2025 twice. But yeah, so if you look here, Widmer is going to be the stud trigger man. He's going to be like the main goal scorer of all those guys I have that I just drafted. He's going to be the 1 year older and play with them for like 4 years, hopefully, as long as he doesn't make the NHL. And he is an absolute stud. He's, I think my scout has him the 3rd best player in the first round, and I got him 18th overall, and he's won a couple gold medals with Team Canada. He just made the Helsinki Cup. So he's a guy that's going to play on Peterson's wing, that first round pick I took, and he's going to be the absolute star winger. So I'm excited for him. I really hope he can score like 40 goals a year in the next couple of years. Not this year, but after this year, I think the top 6 all clear out, and then he'll be like the first line winger. And then I took a really steady, nice defenseman, Bailey. He's going to be the guy he's 17 now, so he has all of 17, 18, 19, and 20. So he's going to be really good by then because he's already really solid. He's got some really good agility and stamina is pretty good, and he's got some good puck handling for a big guy. 6'2", 220 already. So he's going to just be one of those really sturdy defensemen. And then Daly, I was thinking he can play in the opposite wing of Widmer on that stud line. So I could have the stud 16-year-old center and then the two 17-year-old wingers, Daly and Widmer. Because they've already played together for years, so already got some chemistry built up. So I figured it would be really sick to have them as like 5-year players together, him and Widmer. Because I drafted him because he was like 5'8", and he's grown a lot too. I drafted him because he was really fast and had good face-offs and had some really skilled stuff. He was actually a center. So he was a guy, and I taught him all the different positions last year, which was awesome. I taught him right wing and left wing, got it both to like 14 last year, and then training camp got back up even more. So he's a guy I think could be a wicked. He's already like a 9 rated up and down winger and back checking for. He's a good defensive player, and so I think he'd be a really good all-around player to play with those highly skilled guys as like an energy guy, 6 foot, like 180 in a year or two. So I'm hoping that's the plan. I think Widmer might be too good to play that overage season, in which case we might roll with somebody else. Like Prestage actually has developed really nicely. He was really lowly rated, but he was 6'4", like 160 when I drafted him, and he was like 6 in all the speed categories in this, and then he was like all red and orange in this stuff, and he was only like 7 or 8 rated on offense. So he's come a long way. He's still pretty weak, but I think eventually he can be a beast. But anyways, I'll talking too much about this last year's draft class. So I want to talk about the new one. So the whole team's going to be built around this. Peterson was my stud pick. My scout's opinion, he's the 3rd best player in the draft. There's the one superstar generational player, Unger. There was like a 6'3", 220-pound defenseman that was like a 1.5 star that went 3rd overall. This was a monster too. And then it had Peterson as the 3rd best player in the draft. My scout had him ranked much higher than the guys that went like, I think even 1st overall was like a center. My scout thinks this guy's better. So if you look at him, this is after training camp progression. He had a huge progression. And he's just a freak offensively. He's a lot like Brenneman. He's got 14 offensive read, 14 getting open, 13. His passing went up 2 or 3. It was only like 11. And so his puck handling and passing already went up 1 or 2 each. And his checking went up. And so he's already just a freak. He's a 12 rated playmaker. So he is going to be in the discussion. And most likely, if he stays off injuries, he'll probably be in the top 2 or 3 all-time points getters is my prediction. I think he'll be that good. He's going to be first-line center for at least 3 years. This year he's only 16, so I'll probably have him on like the 3rd line, the 4th line, maybe even throw him on the power play because he's so good offensively, and face-offs are so elite. It's like a first-line center and everything except for defense. And his defense isn't bad just because he's young. His offense is a lot better than his defense. But 9 and 10 for positioning defensive read are actually really good. That'd be like one of the better defensive centers. Like he'll be like 13, 14s hopefully eventually. So he's already like a first, second line quality offensive player. It's just his defense is more like a later guy. So I could probably even throw him on the power play as a rookie because his offense is so good. But because it's going to be him. He's the same type of offense player as my first line center. It's just my first line center is that really good foreign guy I picked in the CHL import, and he's just got really good defense too, though. So he's a little bit better than Peterson at this point, but not by much. So that's how good Peterson is. I think he's going to be play with Widmer, and that combo is going to be nasty. So in the 2nd round, there was a ton of guys to pick from. I decided eventually to go with this defenseman, 6'2", 199 guy. Grew to a little bit. He just had a really good shot, and he was really solid on D. And he's got really good passing, and he has a really good frame. And I really liked his 4-star potential, and I just figured he was going to be a guy that was just going to be... I already had the left defenseman I showed you, Bailey, the 17-year-old, that's 6'2", 220. That's really good. So I figured these two can play together for like 4 years and just form a really good first-line pairing, because then Bailey and him are both really steady. Actually, no, I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan was actually to separate those two. So Nolan, I taught him left defense a little bit in preseason too. But yeah, so Lundy I figured would be that steady 2nd line guy, and then I'd pair him with an offensive left defenseman, which I ended up doing, drafting a couple of really good offensive left defensemen. So I figured Lundy was just the safe, that was the plan there. Lundy was just the safe defensive guy with a big shot. And then I thought I'd pair him with a good guy, a puck mover with high offensive read and puck handling. So that was what I ended up doing. So I figured that would be the plan to make a really good top 4, is get a really good offensive right defenseman to pair with Bailey. And then I get Lundy to pair with an offensive left defenseman in the 2nd line. So that'd be my top 4 in the future. So I think, because if you look, he's really far off. He's only a 4 rated now. But I think in a few years he'll be that steady 10 rated defensive guy. But it depends on how he progresses. He wasn't a super high potential guy, but I just figured with all these 2nd round picks, I might as well take a guy I thought was going to just had a good frame and a lot of tools, and I thought was a pretty safe bet to develop into a pretty solid player. But anyways, the other second round pick, I actually reached a little bit. This guy wasn't quite as high; he's only 3-star potential, but he had 12 speed, which was the best in the draft, and he grew already from 5'9", 180 to 5'10", 186 in one training camp. He's just a really good offense player, really good speed and passing, which I like, and offensive read and all the important stuff. I figure he'll sit in junior for a year or two and develop his defense, and I think he's a guy that will eventually. I really wanted to have some explosive wingers with good speed. That's why I was looking for those high potential, good skaters. So I figure eventually he'll grow into one of those really good, fast wingers that will just have a really good offensive game and lack a little bit on the defense, but that's fine. He won't be like probably on that first line with Peterson. He'll probably be more of a second, third line guy. So just be nice. I really want to build the team around good skaters, and I really liked his game. So I'm happy he already grew a little bit. And I just think he's going to be a really, really good offensive player. And I just, with this many picks, I figure if I can overload on offense, it'll just be a really high-scoring team. And so that was kind of the plan there. I just, like I said, I really wanted to go with the 12s because no one else really had over like 10 speed in the draft. So I figured with all these second-round picks, I might as well just nab him early and make sure I didn't miss out on that 12 speed. So I'm really excited to see what he turns into. Fournier was the next pick. He was the highest current rated player in the draft at the point, my scout said. And he's another guy that he has 3-star potential, but he had really good in everything else. His injury rating's flawless. The only guy I've ever seen that was all white there, the sturdy. And so he's got just elite in everything. He was just only 5'8", but he's 190, which is pretty stocky for that size. So that's there's a lot of guys in the NHL now that are 5'8", 5'9". It's more of a skating league than it used to be. So he had really good speed. He had like 10 rated and everything. And he had really good defense, 10 positioning. He had 10 faceoffs, and he had really, really good offense. So he was just, I think, at the current level he was at, was just way above everyone else in the draft at that point. But he also had good potential because he's just so skilled and everything and such a good skater. So he's so talented. His long-term potential is still really good because I figured he'd be like a 12 and 13 and everything. He actually reminded me of my old center, if you remember, Kellerman. I had 2 Kellermans. Oh, that's weird. How come it won't? That's definitely how it's spelled. Weird. Anyways, if you remember Kellerman, I drafted Kellerman. Actually, this is bugging me. I'm going to go to history now. This is kind of important. So if you look at Kellerman, would have been from about one of these years. Gosh, that long ago already? Time flies. Yeah, would have been from like down here, 25 year. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it's Kellerman, M-E-N. Okay, so he reminded me a lot of Kellerman. Kellerman I drafted at 5'8", 175, and he grew all the way to 6 foot, 215. He was just about the same player. Kellerman was a good skater, had good offense, and his defense got really good. So he was just a really steady guy that was like a 3-year starter. I think he was one of those guys that didn't produce that as much as he really should have for how good his ratings were, but I figured in my head it's just like he was a decent, solid guy. I traded him for Guelph for that last year. I think I ended up trading him for some really future picks way back then that ended up being picks that morphed into the picks I just in this draft. So there's actually a chance I could have turned in eventually that second round pick I just used on the guy I'm comparing him to, because I think I traded him to Guelph for like a 3rd and a 4th, and then I used some of those picks to maybe potentially get some of these picks. So that's just how long in the future like those moves, if you're really looking for the future there, that can really help you out down the road. So anyways, let's go back to this draft here. So we got him. I really liked his game. So then we had the center and then the second center. I figured he probably actually turned into a winger, but depending how good his offense got. But just I liked him as a winger because he's a good handler and good offensive read. His passing's a little bit lower, but so anyways, he could play center or wing. But I figured he might actually turn into a winger depending on some circumstances. And then Gods was just too good to pass up. He was almost the same. He was just so much better rated than everyone else at that point in the draft. He had crazy offensive stuff. His offensive read was just kind of in passing, or like the 2 most important categories in my opinion. And so the fact that he was the 2 best in that and had really good defense, it was just too much to pass up. But the crazy thing is he's already grown from 5'10" to 6 foot. I think he was 5'10", 165, or maybe 5'11". So he's definitely growing in 1 or 2 inches, and he had a crazy progression. I think he only had like 10 screening and like 10 passing or something, and they both went up 2, and his defense went up a lot, his skating went up a little bit. So he's a guy that was just way too talented at that point in the draft to pass up. He had the offensive and defensive skills of like a first-round pick, and so that was another one that was just like at that point in the draft, just too much to pass up. And then Tanner Forsey. So that was it for my second round picks. I had planned to go with a little bit more defense, but these forwards are just too good to keep passing out. So I figured my first pick in the third round here was like the second or third pick of the third round from the Sault Ste. Marie trade was Tanner Forsey, and he is so good. My scout actually, I think, has him as like I think he has him as one of the top 10 players in the draft, and I got him in the third round. He had a crazy preseason progression. He is so talented because there's another guy with the same formula, high offensive read, which is really important to me. And then he was a really good defense player, and his skating's gotten a lot better. I think it went up a lot in the preseason training. I think his balance or acceleration went up like 2, and his speed went up 1. So he's another guy, 6 foot at only 15, because he's really young with October birthday. And I just figured he was just so skilled. He's another guy that like lots of years I would take a guy like that at the end of the first round. Just a guy that's like 6 foot and good skater. So he's just all these guys that are like 6 foot, 5'10" and stuff at this age with good skating. Like those guys are going to turn to beasts. This guy could be like 6'2", like 200 with elite offensive games. So there's just so many good guys I just couldn't pass up on. And I didn't really have a certain plan with like, oh, I was going to go goalie here. It's just like best player available at each of these picks. And then I was like, okay, well, it's time to finally go defense here. And then this pick came up. And it was just like, this guy's just too talented to pass up. I was like, I had my first round pick center, and then I was like, you know what, I think I might move that 5'8" guy to wing, but I want another true center. And this guy had 13 passing and 13 faceoffs of the draft, and he was 6 foot, and he's already grown an inch. And so it was another guy where I was like, oh man, like good defense, good faceoffs, good passing, and decent offensive read and good puck handling. So he had a huge progression too. Like that was only 13, that was like 11 or something. And it's just like, man, this guy's already 6 foot and a good face-off guy, and so he could again grow to like 6'3", like 2. Like these guys are just so big and fast and good skaters, and I just kind of followed the same formula for all the forwards. If you notice, really similar players, and they all have high offensive read. So they're just going to be such a cohesive unit, I think, when they get chemistry together and high offensive reads when they're all like 18, 19. It's going to be so beautiful to watch. So I figure Parise will be the second line center most likely because he's so good, talented offensively. So then Peterson will be the first line center, and then that guy will be the second line center, and then they have all these talented wings to play beside them. Peterson will have potentially the 2 guys older than him, Widmer and the other guy is the first line, and then I was thinking the second line would be like Parise with probably Godds and Forsey. These 2 guys I just showed you, the really high offensive reads, and they'll be left and right wing. And then I'd probably make Wisnowski the good skater. He might go up a lot, but he isn't quite as good as those guys that went later than him. But like I said, I reach for him because of speed. Even though it's only 1 or 2 points higher than those guys, I know. But it just has the potential to be like 14, 15. So I probably reached a bit on him, but I just really liked him. I don't really regret that at all. And he only went a little bit higher than these guys. If you look, I picked 35, 36, 38, 41. So they're all really close together. So I just figured I wouldn't miss out on that. So that was the plan there. So I think the second line will be Parise with Fauzi and Godds, and the third line will probably be, this guy'd be like a really good third line center because his defense is really good. And so I figured he probably, maybe if he stays the center, him and Wisnowski would be like the third line there. And then I was like, okay, I got to go defense here. And then I looked, and this guy was still sitting here, and he was just so skilled offensively. He was 5'11", like 10s and everything. And I was like, you know what, for how talented this forward group is already, you just can never have a good offensive talented forwards. And I just had so many picks, and I kind of am confident myself for drafting defensemen that are in the mid rounds that turned out really good. Done that a bunch in the past. I still had multiple fourths and multiple 5th round picks. So I was like, you know what, I had to pick a couple picks later. I knew I'd finally go defense, but it was just another guy. I was like, man, this guy's just better than everyone else left. And he just was like, just so high in everything. The only thing that was low is defense reading stick checking. So I was like, this is the perfect guy. Moved to winger because he's like 5'11", 170 and a good solid skater, 10 speed. So it's like another guy. I was like, man, this guy is going to have another winger with like 10 offensive read, 11 passing. All these guys are going to be all green on offense. So it's like a third line guy that's just going to be a stud. So just I pretty much collected my entire top 9 in my first 3 rounds of draft picks. So that was the plan. And just like I got Lundy, the defenseman, and then the other guy. So I figured I already had like 2 of my top 4 defensemen. So I kind of was a little worried about defense at that point. But then luckily, I found this guy still in the draft, and he was just so good. He was 5'9", he's grown an inch already. And another guy that was just sick. He had 13 positioning, and he had really good puck handling and really good offense. And I can't believe I found this guy this late. He had a really good progression too, by the way. And just another guy. I was like, man, this is like a first line pair. I'm going to put him with Bailey, I think, in the future in the first line because he's so good. And he's going to be a guy that's going to be like 6 foot, like 180, hopefully, and with that really steady, good puck handling Bailey, I figured Baldoni would be like the really good positioning, smart player. I just think he'll be really solid. So hopefully, if he develops a little bit in the offensive read and the passing, I think he can be like that first line pairing defenseman. And then I found a really good offensive defenseman. I was like super excited about. I probably would have taken this guy earlier if I'd seen him. He slipped through the cracks a little bit, but if you look at him, he's insane. He's got 12 hitting. He's got 10 checking, so he's a really physical player. He's really small, but he's got an insane offensive game. Crazy shot, 13 and 9 is about the highest you'll see. You don't really see young defensemen with over like 6 or 7 shooting actually very often. So he's got a crazy shot, and then he's got elite offense, and he's got really good defense, and he's a good skater. So like I couldn't believe I found this guy this late, but it just felt late because I had so many picks. But really, it was like the 4th round. So it was like I have gotten a lot of really like I showed you that defenseman I got in the 4th round early in the episode there. You can get some really good players here. That's why this draft's so crazy, because he was like my 10th pick, but he was just so good. So he'll probably be the second line pairing with Lundy. The funny thing is, I think he'll actually turn out better than Lundy looking at them. Lundy just had the size, and I probably a bit earlier than I should have, but I just didn't want to miss out on a big 6'2", like athletic skating defenseman with a huge shot and good passing, and just had a lot of long-term value for me. I don't think he'll be very good till 18 or 19, but I think he's one of those players that'll be really solid when he's 18, 19, 20. So he'll be. I just figure that's kind of funny, because I honestly have a feeling that Ethanol will be a lot better than him. I just think he'll be the small guy that will get overlooked a little bit. But if he can get to like 5'10", 185, I think he'll be solid in a year or two. So yeah, it's just some small guys with a lot of talent. And I wasn't super worried about taking small guys because I just care more about skating at this point. And I figure with how young this team is, they're all like grow a little bit, because the main goal is for like 2 to 3 years from now, not this year, next year. So I wasn't worried about getting those physically developed 16-year-olds that are already ready to play. This is all guys that just want to be good when they're 18, 19. So I didn't really look at size too much. Picked another small guy with solid defense here, and you can start to see the quality go down a little bit now that we're in the mid rounds. This was like one of the better players in the draft, but you can see a lot more red and orange for these guys. And but he was just a decent defensive player with the 2 high categories I always value: position, defensive read, and he had a good shot, and he was like an average skater. So it's just another guy I figure. It's just another kind of lottery pick. If he grows like 3-4 inches and gains like 40 pounds, I think he'll be a beast. I also could see him just never getting signed, though. Kind of small and not great. I was really happy. I found this really good offensive player. Really lacking the defensive side, and skating's a little bit below average, so he fell a bit. But he's 6'1", 180, and has really good offense. So he's another guy I think could be a huge long-term potential guy that could go up a lot, depending on how good his potential is. Like it's 2.5, which is really solid. The other one thinks it's 1 though, so it really depends. My scout's right, and he's more of a 2.53 guy. I think he can go up a ton, but I could see his defense just never really getting. This is exactly what Stewart looked like. So I'll show you. If you look at his ratings really closely, you see all like 10 and 8s in offense, but then all like 6, 7s on defense. If you look at Stewart, that's pretty much what Stewart looked like at that time. That was 5 years ago. You see how much time changes everything. And he had like 7, 8 and all the skating also, or 8 or 9 maybe. And then he had like all 6, 7s in this stuff. And then his offense was decent, like 8, 9s and stuff. Had a couple like maybe 10s. So he was like 6'2", 180. So the other guy is 6'1", 180. So it's really similar profiles, and you can see how good Stewart turned out. He's like an overager, who's going to be my main offensive defenseman this year. So that is just one of those things. I think depending on how he develops, he could turn into a really good player. So I took a couple. I have real flyers here with these last 3 picks, all kind of like high upside offensive guys that are small. So or this guy was just McKnight. Is small. He's not super high upside, but he's like average. So I'm just hoping one of these 3 turns out. Ethanol, McKnight, Grabsky. I think Ethanol will definitely be by far the best, but he might not grow at all. But I think he'll turn out for sure. So if one of these 2 turn out, I'll be happy, because I think those 2 will be really good. Baldoni and Ethanol. Baldoni and Ethanol are both a lot better, and then these guys are more potential. I think Grabowski will turn out eventually because his offense is so good. So we'll see, but you never know, right? With all these picks, that's where you just kind of throw a bunch of crap at the wall and see what sticks. That's the whole idea there. So and then after that, I won't go over all these picks too much. This episode will stay short, but just a lot of a lot of pretty solid wingers here after this. I had liked them at that point in the draft based off of a certain amount of things. Like this guy had good defense, and I figure if I'm picking a winger this late in the draft, he'd be more of a fourth line guy anyways. So I liked his defense. I figure, he's a big guy. I figure maybe his offense will catch up and will actually turn pretty solid. But these aren't guys you really expect to roster, like the 12th picks in the draft and stuff. So this guy was actually really. This is a guy I really found late that was actually really good. So I actually like him a little bit better than almost some of my 5th round picks. I got this guy quite a bit later. So I think another guy, 5'9", if he can grow to like 6 foot, I think this guy could turn out. So I really found some good sleeper defensemen. Then I found another solid defenseman late that I liked. That was below average to average skater, but he's a really good defensive player and kind of physical, and actually has some key offensive categories. So I found a ton of defensemen late in the draft, and like I said, I drafted so many that just even if 2 or 3 of those 6 or 7 guys I drafted after the 3rd round turn out, I'll be really happy. And funny enough, I think this 7th round pick will actually has quite a bit better chance than this 4th round pick, McKnight. I just like McKnight because his shot and his defense and his skating was decent, but I really honestly, looking back, would probably pick Sinclair over Knight, even though he went 2 rounds later. So Knight, we'll see, give Knight a chance, but actually that's probably the one pick I kind of regret. I just, at the time, I just figured he was... there just wasn't a lot of defensemen that could skate at this point in the draft still that had decent defense. So that was kind of my thinking there. I just drafted a lot of like 5'9" guys. So we'll see who turns out. But at the end of the day, this whole draft class was just built around getting Peterson early. And then after that, I knew if I could surround him with some offensive wingers, he's an elite scorer and the key player to this draft class. So I got my star early from the 1st round. I was really, really lucky to get him at 15th overall. And then I just surrounded him with a bunch of high upside wingers and then a bunch of steady defensemen. So we'll see how this class turns out. But the plan right now is in 3 or 4 years to have Peterson as that 1st line center, and then I think Parise is going to be really, really like almost like a 90-point guy too with his elite offense. So having him in the 2nd line, you have those 2 top-notch centers, and I'm just really excited. I think Forsey, I wish I could roster him this year, but I want to stick to the rules of only being able to roster 4 guys. So I went with the top. I went with Peterson, Lundy, Fournier, and then I forget who the 4th guy is I rostered. Maybe I haven't rostered the 4th guy yet, but I think I wanted to leave Wisnowski and Junior for a year for sure, and then Gods. But yeah, Gods and Forsey are definitely going to be really good players. I'm really excited to see those guys. So I just can't wait to get those guys playing together next year when they're all 17 and get the chemistry started. So right now, I think from the looks of it, Peterson's going to be, like I said, teamed with Widmer on the 3rd line probably, and they're just going to be dynamic because Widmer's just so good. I cannot wait to see that combination in action. And yeah, so this year is going to be really interesting. I'll make another episode on that later. But one more guy I got in the import was this guy. He's so good. He's import, so he's actually the same age as that 16-year-old 1st round pick I traded for last year. And he might even be better than Reese. He's such a freak. He's 6'6" and had a crazy progression. He went up in 4 categories, which is the most I've ever had a goalie go up. He's got 4-star potential. So he's, funny enough, could actually end up being the starting goalie. Because yeah, if you look at him, he's actually Reese is still probably a bit better. He has higher potential to 5-star still, but if you really look at them closely, I actually almost prefer Sadko. But yeah, so if I can sign Sadko, hopefully, because he still doesn't want to sign, even though I have an open 4-in spot, he could be like 6'6", 240 and like 12 and everything, hopefully. But so they could be the 2 goalies that are 1 year older. So they could one of these 2 would probably be the overager the year that whole draft class is 19, along with Widmer and Daly. So that could be the plan actually, depending on if these guys keep going up or whatever, or I could just draft another goalie next year and roll with that guy. But that was the one thing I didn't draft a goalie this class. There just wasn't any goalie worth taking in any spots I had. But I figure since Reese is only 1 year older and goalies all just stay for their overage year, that I would just do that. So definitely probably go with either Reese or Satko as an overager that year, and that'll be the plan. So yeah, anyways, that's it. The episode was a little longer than I intended, but it was a pretty good one. Went over all those draft picks. Now we'll know the whole future, and we can... Oh, and then I didn't even talk about it. One more thing. I friggin' went and traded for a 1st round pick. I made a massive trade and gave up like a crap load of assets. But I saw this guy. He went right after the center I picked in the 1st round. And I really didn't want to pass up on this guy. But that center and Peterson was just too good. But this guy was incredible, and he is 13 agitator as a rookie, which is like the highest I've ever had a rookie rated. He's just unbelievable. He was just so skilled. He's 5'6", 159, so he grew a little bit already, and a crazy talented, high energy guy. I'm so excited to get him. So I traded a fuckload for him. I went and traded a 19-year-old stud center, Blackbird, so he's going to be like their first or second line center. I traded my former second round pick right defenseman, Rusk, who, if you remember, he was like the kind of like the defenseman I just took in the second round, 6'2" guy, just kind of like a 4-star with like pretty solid and everything. But I just figured he won't be on the team when all these guys are older, and I had so many good defensemen, I just didn't really have room for him. But he'd be like more of a second line. I looked, and he's actually gonna be a second line guy for them, and so I got him. And then I gave up Ballston, who was a really steady 19-year-old defenseman. I took in the third round 4 years ago, and he's just turned into a really solid, like 13 rated guy. I'll show you him actually. Ballston just had like really, actually he's gone down a little bit, but he had like 12, 13 and everything on defense, and was just a steady like 10 rated guy. And they had like no defenseman over like a 0.5 star, so he's actually like their first line defense player. So I literally traded them like all these like pretty much like a really good trade, because I traded them like 3 or 4 guys that are gonna be like first, second line guys, and Ronald I had actually earlier in the episode, if you remember, the winger, and I gave up second round pick. So I thought that was a really fair trade because he was really close to a second round pick anyway. So they literally just like get a second round pick. He went 16th. And then they get 4 starting like first, second line guys are all 18, 19. So I thought that was a really realistic trade, especially Ottawa. They were runner up in the Memorial Cup a couple years ago, and then like deep playoff runs last few years. So the team that pulls in a ton of fans, and they're always competitive. So trading them all these good 19, 18-year-olds and then a second round pick for a late first round pick, I thought was really fair trade. And yeah, because I was going to make this trade in January and stick to the rule, whereas like first round picks only be traded in January. But I just figured it's just the game. Like I'm going to sim the whole year anyways, and the fact I knew I was going to trade for him, whether it was now or the deadline, I might as well just do it now, because like in real life they can actually not report and get traded before that year, like the Peterborough trade a couple years ago. So I just figured I was going to 100% make that trade anyways. I might as well just do it, and I gave up. Then they get those 19-year-olds for the whole season instead of just half the year, so it was more fun for them, and then it just gives him more time to build chemistry. So I definitely was super excited about that, because that was a trade I was going to make at the deadline anyways, and he was just so good. I just really, that's where I kind of forgot about actually at the start of this episode. I kept talking about the lines or whatever. So he's actually going to be the right winger for Peterson for 4 years. So that combination is just going to be so nasty. It's just going to be so fun to have those two guys together, because he's just got such... Oh, and he had the craziest progression I've ever seen. That was the best part. His training camp progression, he went up +3 screening. So it literally went from 11 to 14. And his checking was already insane in hitting. So he's just like a freakishly... like aggressive player for his size. So even if he's only like 5'9", there's so many guys in the NHL that are like 5'9", 175 now, and like it's just so cool to have a small guy that's a good skater and aggressive like that. And I can't wait to see him, Widmer. It's gonna be him, Widmer, and freaking Peterson together for 4 years. That's gonna be the future. So if you look at it, it's kind of similar, where Widmer's like the Kozlovsky a little bit, Peterson's like the Brenneman, and then McDonald's going to be like the Bear. Because you remember Bear was like actually the most highly rated of those 3 guys. He was so good at defense. So it's the same idea, where McDonald's actually the highest rated with the 13 agitator. And I think that line is going to be the future Bear line like that. So then that'll free up Daly to actually play on a second line with that really good center edge after the high faceoffs, and then be able to split up maybe Forsey and Gauss, those 2 wingers. So anyways, a lot of options going forward. Or Daly could always just be like a good third line center, moving back to center, and he's actually 12 skating, so that might actually be the better plan, just make him the third line center and move that 5'8" guy to the wing. But tons of options, and I'll cut the episode off there. Don't want to ramble too much, but yeah, really excited for the future.